Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of mid-year roundup, listening to some of your favorite songs that have come out in this year so far. Today we're going to be checking out Alcest, which I feel like we've checked out recently enough. Definitely in store for some more black metal, as that's what I associate with that name. We got some L'Enfant de la Lune. Let's dive into this and see what Alcest is bringing to the table today. A very interesting combination of sounds, timbres, harmonies. So the choir chord progression is one of rising intensity, but the guitar chord progression kind of to me feels pop punk. Like this right here. But the drums are very metal. I'm not quite able to place the vocals, but even the way that they write the melody against the chord progression doesn't feel like it's any part of pop punk. It's its own thing, just like everything else, just smashing together so many different sounds here. Oh, bring in vocal layering. The production is interesting too. It's simultaneously very fuzzy wall of sound, but there's just enough definition for me to hear everything in isolation. It's like, it's not high fidelity, but it's not low fidelity, but it's not mid either. Mid, I think, would be a midpoint of both. It kind of exists on each side in equal amounts, but not in the middle. That makes no sense, right? But that's what it sounds like to me. That was an interesting section. It felt very divorced from everything else. Sort of just one idea over and over before coming back to this very pop rock style idea. Now this feels like we're pushing towards an ending with those choirs resolving down like that. Ah. But there's still 2 minutes left. So I'm interested to see where we go from here, because that was a very strong candidate for the end of a song. Interesting polyrhythmic idea there with the oddly syncopated chimes. Interesting production on that hi-hat. Oh, the hi-hat actually makes more sense with this section. I'd almost say the last part needed a little bit of tweaking on it, but I can see why it would have been chosen. Alright, well, my first comment is that really Alcest? Because we just checked them out a couple weeks ago, maybe. Maybe just 1 week ago, honestly. I think they showed up last week for the good black metal. Or a special selection recently or something. Anyways, we've listened to some recently, and that would never have been on my guesses of what I was in store for that artist. It's just, I mean, there's some black metal elements in it. We have the blast beats, we have the heavy fuzz, primary focus on chord progression and atmosphere over riffs and melodies. Like, there's definitely the parts that are I'd say, okay, this person came from a black metal background and they're incorporating new ideas into their works, which they've always sort of done, right? I don't think Alcest, maybe at the very beginning, but they've always been a bit more of an experimental artist, trying to find new ways to incorporate that black metal foundation that seems to sit at the core of their sounds. This is a very interesting direction for that concept. But at the end of the day, the black metal elements, I think, are downplayed quite a bit more than normally with this artist's output. And instead, we have a pop punk shoegaze track that happens to incorporate some blast beats in it from time to time. It's again just not something I would expect from them. This is a welcome surprise, I think. I don't know that I would necessarily go out of my way to listen to more, although I am intrigued about the full album. But I think one time through the album would probably be enough for me, if I made it all the way through the album at all. It's still not a sound that I really liked, but it was so refreshing, so new, so bizarre of a mashup of ideas that I have to see what else is being done here in the raw experimentation of this. So we will get to some positive stuff in a moment. But first, I gotta talk about that ending. I don't think I get it. I still think that ending the song at about 5.5 minutes in would have been the perfect way to do that. I think that musically we had reached a peak that the rest of the song does not touch back on. We also had a real strong sense of finality right before the final build-up, and it feels like a place that the song wanted to stop. But we didn't. Okay, we'll see what the artist goes on. And then we just had another 2 minute slow burn that, I mean, we just got out of a slow burn. We slow burned to a peak. We brought the vocals back in. We had this new chord progression in the choir that said, "This is the end." Massive moment after a big build-up coming down from the very bottom. Like, this is how you design the peaks to hit this new high to wrap up before you hit your denouement and finish the song out. And then just chose not to do that. It's like they put a fourth act on a film, but the core issue, the villain's been defeated. There's no more character arcs to go through. Our characters have grown. You just get to see a little bit of their life after they defeated the final villain, and it's just mundane slice of life stuff. And like, in a certain context that works well, but at the end of an action or a big fantasy epic or something, it's very anticlimactic to designate another third of the song to that, or quarter of the film to that, I should say, to stick with the metaphor. And that's sort of what happens here. I really feel like this is a 5.5 minute song. Granted, it would not have been good to stop right at that 5.5 minute mark. You would still need to write an ending to that. It's just that moment feels very much like we're right on the cusp of the finale. You'd still need to find a way to fade it out, or to bring all the lines down to an ending. But then we just get another build-up that doesn't quite hit the same highs. It doesn't get the same growth. It doesn't have all the layers. There's a lot of instruments in this final build-up that aren't present, that were prior. We hit a peak and then decided to make a new peak, but never hit the same highs. It makes no sense to me. It is a perfectly fine section of a song, but it almost feels tacked on, like Alcest had this idea sitting around and they didn't know where to put it, but they really liked it. They wanted to include it on the album, and they're like, "Oh, just throw it at the end of a track." And like, it's nice. It's a good build up. It wraps up really well. It's a nice finale. It just makes no sense after that 5.5 minute mark, which was very much finale material. So I'm kind of curious what the thought process was that went into that. But yeah, I'm just like, I don't know. That's a strange choice to me. But honestly, it's a strange choice among strange choices, and the other strange choices worked out well, so I can see why there might have been a gamble on that one if there was some indecision about it at all, because this whole song is like a weird experiment. It kicks off, and I don't remember what my face looked like right there at the beginning, but I'm sure it was a mix of amusement, curiosity, and confusion, because I had no idea what was going on. I'd never heard anything like this before. This is experimental. The guitars are very fuzzy, very distorted, kind of has a little bit of that black metal texture to it, but not quite as far as black metal tends to go. It's why I mentioned gaze. This feels a lot more shoegazy to me than anything else. But it's really only the electric guitars that carry that. And they are predominantly focused on atmosphere and texture. Throughout this entire track, we don't really get riffs. It's all about chords and guitar tones, and how all of that forms an atmosphere. The bass is present and has some cool moving lines across the entirety of the track, but isn't always a focus. We do have choir at times, elevating everything. They are very high pitched compared to the guitars, and they tend to always have a rising, escalating idea to add intensity to the song through pitch and rising chord progression. They do find resolution at the end, but it is not resolution of coming down from a tense point to a less tense point. It feels like constant rising action. I honestly have no idea how it happens, and I would love to know what that 4-chord progression is on the choir in the intro of this song. Later on, around the 4.5-5 minute mark, we do shift this over to a 3-chord progression in the choir. We hit a low point, we hit high tension, higher pitch, and then we resolve down. That works out really well, and again, showcases finality in a way that the choir hasn't done elsewhere. It's what really cements that section as an ending for me. And then we have the vocals, which aren't quite here at the present, but we will hear a few times throughout the song. Clean vocals. I've never heard clean vocals from Alcest, I don't think. And there's a lot of reverb on them. I feel like there's a tad bit of pitch correction. Some of the pitches felt a little too flat to me. They didn't feel human. But a lot of that's disguised as well in the production. The vocals are not very loud. They're not placed above the band like they would be in a pop punk song. They're kind of tucked down underneath, which makes a little bit more sense from the black metal perspective. And that kind of hides some of that. Again, I don't think there's an aggressive amount of pitch correction, but there's enough for me to have noticed it. And, as usual, I want to put this disclaimer. I don't think it's because the vocalist can't sing. It could be a completely aesthetic choice for this track alone. I have no idea. Like I said, I've never heard the dude Cleed sing before, so I have no metric or any other data to have a conclusion about how good of a singer they are. I just know I heard pitch correction here. And that kind of wraps it up. A lot of the song is chord progressions and textures from everyone, except for the vocals, which gives us melody. The few times they're there. For a 7.5-minute song, I'd be surprised if the vocals showed up for more than 90 to 100 seconds. It really was not a lot of vocal work in here. A lot of it is about building the atmosphere, the tension, and moving through these chords and these sections and doing these slow burns. But there's one instrument that I didn't bring up, and that's because it's the most dynamic of the group. It's the drums. The first drumming that we hear is blast beats, alternating snare and bass. It kind of gave me a little bit of a shock because it is the one defining element that feels so out of place. Black gaze is a genre that does combine the gazy elements, the textures and the guitar tones of shoegaze with some of the writing and drum work of black metal. It tends to be heavier though. This is interesting because it does kind of feel like black gaze to me, in that we are combining black metal and shoegaze, but it's in a vastly different area than a group like Kardashev does with their black gaze. Oh, they do death gaze though, don't they? I don't know. I feel like those two genres have so much overlap. Death metal and black metal, I get confused often, unless it's like very stereotypical. And I'll be like, oh, of course that's death metal. There's no way. But like, they do have a lot of overlap. I don't know. But the idea where you can definitively tell, yes, this is metal, and there are some gazy things to it. This feels like, yeah, this is gaze, but like, there's a drum beat in there from metal. Like, one small element is metallic. And it's just a very different ratio, I think, of the gaze to the blackened. And so that threw me off. But then, of course, you pair that with the pop punk guitar chords, and you're like, oh, that's a strange combination there. It was just so wild because I heard the drums first. I was like, oh, geez, more black metal. I knew it. It's Alcest. Like, dude, black metal was last week. We're 3 days in on this one, and we've listened to 2 black metal tracks already. But, everything else came in. I was like, oh, it's not really black metal, is it? But the drums do take a time to step back a little bit and chill out. And we do get some cool, groovier, lighter beats throughout this. They're still rather rigid, though. There is one syncopated drum groove in here. We don't get to listen to it for very long. A lot of the other drum work is just rigid, light stuff. Instead of the alternating bass and kick as fast as we do, maybe we'll have a snare on 3 and a bass kick on 1, 2, and 4. It's still a rigid quarter note idea. There's not a lot of syncopation to it. The rhythm is static, but it's just not as aggressive as black metal tends to be. And so that ends up being my relationship with a lot of the drum work on this, is that it is functional in a lot of ways, which is interesting because black metal drum work often tends to be functional as well. It's just done at such a high skill level. The raw stamina and speed and precision of playing all of these notes in a black metal track, blast beats in general, tends to be a bit too spectacular of an event for me to say, oh, that's just purely functional. But it is. The rigid staticness of a lot of third wave black metal drum beats make them a bit functional. They're there to create the time. It's a really fast display of the time, but they don't really do anything to create syncopation, to create melodic elements, to do drum fills. It's there to be a metronome. It's just that this metronome plays 4 times as often and ends up becoming more of a background droning, a white noise for the song. But yeah, it's kind of functional, isn't it? And that's what the drumming ends up here. And I think it's one of the things that I would want more attention paid towards in another song or maybe another album from Alcest as they continue to expand and grow in different non-metallic ways, is to incorporate some more rhythmic drum work into a song. And I don't want to throw shade on this entire album. It's possible I got the one song with the very generic black metal rhythms on it. Um, but it is something I see in a lot of black metal projects as they try to branch out and incorporate other styles in, is that they might incorporate lighter harmonic ideas, they might incorporate melodies and riffs, maybe clean vocals, maybe they change their guitar tones, maybe they have layering, but the drums always tend to be a bit simple rhythmically. And so maybe I'm just extrapolating a little bit here, but I would. Everything else lightened up. Everything's rock in here and layered until you get to the drums, and then that's metal and static. So, like I said, that's the one thing that I think really stands out to me. Now, I think the last thing I want to bring up is texture, emotion, atmosphere. Basically, what this song does really well. And what's wild is that parts of the song make me feel like I'm supposed to be joyous about something, especially anything the choir does feels bright and happy. It feels like the sun shining through, but the pop punk chord progression just feels like fun. And maybe I'm supposed to read both of these together as a sort of fun happiness, fun joy, positivity in all elements, some exuberantness. But then I also look at the title of the song, L'Enfant de la Lune, French for the infant of the moon or the moon child, something along those lines. I hope that's right because I'm using my own definition of that. I should probably look up a translation later. But I'm pretty sure we have child and then de la to me is of the. I mean that's Spanish right there, close enough. And then luna or Lune is like Luna. That's moon in Spanish. I know they're not completely correlatable, but it's all romantic languages, so like there's parallels here. And so I'm going off my Spanish here. I think that says Baby of the Moon, which I would have expected something a bit darker. Something that would have fit the black metal element a little bit more. Maybe not in its weight and intensity, but in the darkness that it tends to play around with harmonically. And so I was really happy when the middle of the song began to take something a bit more moodier as we reach that first slow burn. And that slow burn eventually escalates into something praising of a sort. It almost feels like we should be happy and joyous for this child for whatever reason. And a little bit of the darkness of the moon comes in there. And I really love that combination of things. The final slow burn, though, sort of just returns to more of the pop punk ideas. It returns back to that fun really wants to be bouncy, but the drums won't let it be energy. And without the choir, though, we lose the joy. And I don't know how to read that in particular when combined with the narrative I got from the rest of the song. I'm really curious what the lyrics are saying, so we're going to dive into that, but that's my journey right there. Fun and joyous, moody celebration, and then just energetic fun. And that could be used to describe a lot of stories. I'm trying to figure out the best way that that would work into the concept of this title, but let's just look at the lyrics immediately. Let's just look at the lyrics for real. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. It's lyrics time, boy! I totally forgot that there was the Japanese intro to this. Interestingly, it is a first stanza to the song that is identical to the final stanza. It is the only thing in here that feels looped at all musically, but it does allow the ending of the song to have a connection to the beginning. I'm curious about the decision to use a different language altogether, but I can't seem to find any reason why being disconnected from this track, being outside of the creation process. So I'd love to know, get an interview from Alcest to see why they decided to go that direction. So I'm not actually going to bring it up yet. I'll touch on it on the end of the lyrical discussion when we head to that stanza. The song appears to be about wavering hope for the future as you get older. And the moon, the stars, the nighttime in general giving you that hope of a better tomorrow. About personifying the moon as a goddess, one who does bring joy and hope to those who are able to view the beauty of the moon. The song does translate to the moon child, but it isn't about an infant at all, or a child. It is about the inner child of our narrator, remembering who they were previously and comparing that to who they are now. The first verse says, regrets accompany waves that come by on the colorless sand incessantly. The waves enter the circle of the ascending moon on standby, on wandering souls, that from up there she's calling back. Now, this does have a bit of a stutter, stop kind of feel to it, where many of the lines feel disconnected from those around them, almost as if they're isolated ideas, but generally carry on a thread of concept. I don't know how much of this is because of intent or how much of it comes from the translation. It is a French song. French? Yes, it is a French song. But the general idea here to me is about waves, the ebb and flow, how they crash on the beach and wash out, and how negative feelings, it specifically mentions regret, but it talks about life being, or it talks about the beach being colorless sand. It could be about any sort of boredom or mediocrity of life, that the waves come and go. Some days are better than others. And the moon sits up there in the sky and calls to us from up there. The second verse says, the child that I once was, in silence I endure and dream, a strange child of the moon, still contemplating the sea on top of deserted islands during the long, lonely nights. So, like I mentioned, almost a bit of remembering who you were, that childlike wonder when life isn't great right now, being on deserted islands, lonely for long periods of time. Just remember that sort of hope and curiosity you had as a child contemplating the sea. And this is where all this negativity gets wrapped up into something a bit more positive. This is our final stanza and is the French repetition of our Japanese opening stanza. It says, tonight the stars are dancing to revive hope. The stars dance and sigh to the rhythm of the waves, and the calm moon that watches us overlooking the strikes falls in the black, still waters deep in our souls pour. It's the idea that the moon watches over us. It controls the sea. We have the entire thing. Geez, it's been a long time since I studied this. So much of the tides are controlled by lunar magnetic forces or something like maybe lunar gravity. I'm not, as usual. I feel like I say this so much. I'm not a scientist, I'm a musician. I'm vaguely remembering things from school half the time, which was like a decade and a half ago. Um, but yeah, so there is this connection though between the moon and the sea. And I really like how we have the concept of the sea present alongside this moon goddess, and how the moon watches over not just us, but also the shores as well, and allows the water to flow into the depths of our soul, where the water could be a metaphor for a lot of things. It could just be the natural beauty of Earth and allowing that to wash over us, to never forget that portion. It's not just the sea, it's the gorgeous 75% of the Earth. So, again, I don't know everything that's going on here. I'm sure there's some stuff that's a bit lost in translation, and the stuttery lyrical delivery of each line sort of being threaded together but in seemingly independent ways. It just makes the stuff go over my head a little bit, but there's some beautiful imagery here, and I love what they're going for. If anyone has any more definitive ideas about what this song might be about lyrically, please let me know in the comment section. But tying this back to the song, I feel none of this. This is about being lonely, being down, kind of not wanting to wake up tomorrow in a sense, like just life kind of sucks at times. And this hyper focuses on those moments. It says, yeah, but don't forget where you came from. Don't forget about that childlike wonder. Don't forget about the moon goddess and how she watches over you. Don't forget about the beauty of the water, the stars dancing overhead, and the rhythm of the waves crashing upon the beach. There is beauty here. And so this negativity, trying to shine a light through it, that's not what the song tells me at all. The song is joyous, exuberant, brilliant at times, a blinding light of positivity. Maybe it's supposed to be the moon goddess coming through the song, that lyrically it's the depression of the narrator, but the song itself is the moon goddess's energy trying to rise or raise him up back up. But aside from that, maybe I kind of feel like I'm grasping at straws there. I don't really feel the tone of the lyrics presented in the music at all. But those are just my thoughts on Alcest's La Fin de la Lune. What did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe just have your own thoughts, opinions, and perspective about it. Put all that stuff down in the comment section. I asked quite a few questions today as well, so if you have any answers to those, put that down in the comment section as well. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.